Right, so we've been recording for 6 minutes, we've been sat here for 24 minutes, and we've not done anything. So, great start. Let's do this. When you're ready.
Cool.
Let's podcast.
Some stretching.
Everyone good?
All good?
Yes.
Good. Stretch.
Welcome to episode 46 of the Picky Bastards podcast. That is being recorded far too early in the morning, so I'm very sleepy. So don't expect me to make much sense today.
If ever.
Well, I knew that was going to come up, but
Come on,
that time zone.
That was too easy.
Time zone.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, I'm also joined by who I'm assuming is also another sleepy boy in Fran.
Hi.
So he probably also won't make sense.
I'm actually all right today.
Yeah. Okay.
For context,
we'll
I have
see.
a newborn baby. I don't just sleep a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm all right today. I got some sleep.
Nice.
We also have Nick.
Hello, how's everyone
Hi,
doing?
Nick. And we have our special guest, who's the editor of piggybees.com, Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hi. Thanks for having me back on the podcast.
Yeah, returning guest.
Welcome back.
You're excited
absolutely.
to talk about some music?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting playlist this month, so looking forward to digging
Don't give
in.
anything away. That's going too soon with that. Don't give anything away.
Well, you're not allowed to say what the
sorry.
playlist is like till the end. Come on, come on.
You fail, you're off. Go.
Well, I'm excited to talk about this playlist. But before we do, as I mentioned, piggybees.com. If you don't like to listen to us, I guess why are you here? But you,
Yeah, fuck off.
Exactly.
but if you also want to read, you can go to piggybees.com. Tom and Fran just did a really good article a couple weeks ago about 2010 and reminiscing about that year, and it was very, very cool, I think. So you should go check
Thanks,
that
Matt.
out. Yeah.
Oh, it's always nice when Matt's the host because he's nice to us, isn't he?
Well,
Matt's nice
I
at the start.
Makes me
I
nervous.
always like to bring up a specific article because they're worth reading.
Nah, it makes me uncomfortable when people are friendly like that. I'm nervous now. We should just get on with it and be abusive.
Yeah, well, this is just to soften you up.
Ah, right, gotcha.
But yeah, we're not going to talk about 2010 today. We're going to talk about 6 albums or 5 albums in a playlist, and they are going to be Turnstile with the album Glow On, Quickly with The Long and Short of It, Lorde with Solar Forever, Little
Solar Power.
Simz with some...
Isn't it?
I thought it was Solar Power.
Is it Solar
Yeah,
Power?
Solar Power. Yeah.
Okay, Solar
Where'd
Power.
you get the word forever?
Showing his extreme credentials there, professional credentials.
Maybe I did listen to Foles recently, which is Total Life Forever.
More importantly,
So-
did you listen to Lorde, though? That's kind of the more important question right now, because that's what we're going to review.
We'll get into that soon enough. We have Little Simz with Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. Cocteau Twins, I think that's how you say it, with Heaven or Las Vegas. And we have Tom's presenting a Nicholas Jaar playlist. Okay, so first we're going to get started, as always, with some questions. And I'm going to start by asking Tom a question. And that question is, what album was most imaginative?
Okay, I think it's a good question, and I think there's definitely an album on this playlist which is, let's just say, highly anticipated. So
I love how he keeps it cryptic to the very last moment. Excellent. There is one album here we need to talk about. I'm not going to tell you what it is, though.
But I'm not going to talk about that album. I'm going to let our listeners give a bit of anticipation before we talk about that album. So I'm going to go with Turnstile's Glow On, Matt's pick for this podcast.
Cool.
Yeah, so I enjoyed this album quite a bit, actually. I'd not heard of the band previously, and given that last time I was on, Matt, you nominated a band called Microwave. I thought it was some sort of practical joke. I don't know. From everyone again, I don't know what the name of the band's going to be. Some inanimate object. But yeah, then I kind of mentioned this to my brother, who's a big kind of hardcore punk fan, or used to be. And he told me that he'd seen this band 3 times, even though I'd never heard of them. So it seems like this album's they've been going at this for quite a while. But the reason I think it's the most imaginative album is because ostensibly it's a hardcore punk album. That's the kind of genre, and it's not a genre I'm hugely familiar with, but I'm used to it kind of hardcore punk albums having quite a heavy kind of sound to them. And I think this one has some kind of inventive musical flourishes, which add like another dimension to the music. So, for example, it starts with this kind of like bubbling. I've put bubbling synth. I don't know if that's right. I've put Ask Nick because you're the one that I normally ask about.
Yeah, bubbling is a technical term I'm very familiar with, Tom. Yeah, absolutely. All the pros know bubbling. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it starts with this bubbling synth, and it kind of.
I was lying, by the way. I know you feel confident that I've said that, but I was totally lying. I've never known what the fuck you're talking about, mate.
So bubbling synth.
That thing that starts the album, you know,
It bubbles. I got you now.
It bubbles.
Yeah,
And it sounds like a
bubbles,
synth.
and it's a synth. Yeah. But yeah, that thing that starts and ends the album and appears as kind of like a motif throughout. It gives it kind of like dreamlike quality, and I think there's a lot of these little musical touches throughout the album. So the song "Fly Again" starts with this kind of haunting piano, and the songs "Underwater Boy" and "Alien Love Call" have these kind of almost like dreamy psychedelic guitars, and I think these little touches, like musical touches, kind of make the heavier songs hit harder because you've got these kind of elements which you wouldn't necessarily expect, and you might expect in different genres of music. But it makes the kind of heavier riffs and the drums and that kind of stuff hit a lot harder than it would if you just had these like relentless riffs for like half an hour. So I've written bubbling synth again here, but for example, the way this synth contrasts with the way. So at the end of the song "Alien Love Call," it's got this synth appears again. And
what kind of synth is it, Tom? I just want to understand.
It kind of bubbles a little bit.
Oh, okay. Got you now. I'm with you.
And it kind of contrasts with the guitars that start the song "Wild World," and they sound like something off like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. That's the only reference I got. Really, old school reference there. I just really like the way the music kind of contrasts and adds another dimension to the music. And I think the album ends strongly too with the song "Lonely Desires," which is probably my favourite song on this. And it's got Blood Orange on the track, who I'm a big fan of. So yeah, I enjoyed this record. They lose marks slightly for doing the titles in all caps, which is always a really annoying thing that people do.
Fair point.
But thumbs up from me. I was kind of surprised that that it was.
Cool. All right, let's switch over to Fran then.
Okay, fair enough. First of all, I'm going to say we've got a little bit of a problem because I'm going to have to reveal your question for me, Matt, which is which of these albums were most by the book, because I was going to go with Turnstile's Glow On. But cool. I do want to make the point that I don't really think any of the albums on this list were totally by the book. I do have a backup, so it's okay. I don't think any of them were totally by the book, but if I was going to choose one, it would have been Turnstile. But that's because a lot of it, not all of it, and Tom's just made some really good points, but I think a lot of it sounds like it's very of a type. I don't know how I'd classify that type or the genre, because, you know, for me, reading everything I did about them, they are classified as a hardcore punk band, but they feel too light and poppy to be hardcore to me. But the reason I'd say they're a little bit by the book maybe is they have the tropes of a rock or punk act. They have a screamy singer, they have guitars turned up to 11, they have frantic percussion, angsty lyrics that often make them sound a little bit younger than they really are, I think. So yeah, and it was the album on the list when I first heard it that sounded most like some other stuff that I remember hearing in the past, maybe Rage Against the Machine, for example. But I also hadn't heard anything like this for quite a long time. And I'm imagining that you guys, and probably from everything I've just said and just your preconceptions of me as a human, would think that I really didn't get on with this record, but that isn't actually the case. I actually enjoyed this quite a lot. I think it's obviously clearly of a type, but I think it's an extremely good version of the kind of album that it is. I think it's fun, I think it's vital, it's relentless. It is a throwback, but I kind of like that about it too. As to whether I'll listen to it again after this process, I'm not entirely sure. I can't really think of a time when I'll be sat there and feel like throwing the Turnstile album on. But it isn't something I would have chosen to listen to usually, and I'm glad that I got to spend a bit of time with it. I think it's a lot of fun. I do think it's got some interesting flourishes, some interesting bubbly synths that do make it stand out a little bit, and it doesn't feel totally by the book. But if I was going to choose one that was of a type, it would have been this album. But yeah, it was good. It was good fun. I can see why it's getting the praise it is.
Nice.
Okay, shall I jump in? Okay,
Yeah,
so
let's go for
before I get into it, I just want to say, and I mentioned in passing, we were talking about this before, whether I should raise, I'm actually going to be leaving the podcast for a little while. But the reason I raised that is because in all the time we've been doing it, I don't think Fran's made a worse association than this band and Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine are a cutting-edge, quality band who at least initially did some groundbreaking stuff. This is not. This is not. Anyway, but let me just back up a little bit and just say, the big confession I have to make is that really all these review opinions are Jill's, my wife's. And Jill described this album much better than I could have done. We had it on in the car, and she said, this album is clearly creamy rock. I just thought there is no better way of describing Turnstile than creamy rock.
Creamy?
I mean, really, it
not
is
bubbly.
whatever, not bubbly. Whatever kind of live energy, and I'll caveat this by saying maybe live they're fantastic. I honestly don't know. But in terms of this album, this production of this album is completely removed any live energy it may have had by massive overproduction, overcompression, over sort of hard set matching of amp distortions, everything is just so boxed off and squared off that it just completely kills the energy to the point where it just feels like it's just dead on its feet. I also, as I was listening to it, I found it so turgid that I thought it was really, really long. So I scanned through before we came on, and I thought, God, this album is so fucking long. It's only 34 minutes. I was like, Jesus Christ, 34 minutes, and yet it still managed to bore me this much. So, creamy rock. Jill nailed it. I hated it.
Oh, well,
there you go.
I'm going to heartily disagree with that. This is to start with, this is one of my favourite albums of the year. I love this album.
I did think it would be.
Oh my God.
It's so much fun. I've listened to it so much. And I think though I wouldn't necessarily 100% agree with Fran's comparison to Rage Against the Machine, this album is so inventive. It is imaginative. It isn't by the book. Like, these guys were like head of class essentially for
I said none
punk.
of the albums were by the book, by the way. I said none of them. None of them.
Yeah, but within this genre, this is making leaps that no one, as far as I'm aware, are really doing. It's they took something. We always talk about an artist playing it safe, or an album that you expect, or someone reaching but not quite hitting. And I think these guys really reached, and I think they really knocked it out of the park with all these different flourishes that do help maintain the energy throughout the album.
Do you think the energy they have live is like this then? Do you think, if you saw them live, they'd sound like this? I know it's speculation, but do you really think...
Yeah.
I couldn't believe anything could
watched
sound
a
like
lot
this live. I mean, I just feel like they'd have to be covered in like cling film or something to sound like this. The amps and everything. I mean, it's just like... Yeah. Sorry.
The songs and the like vitality of the songs and how interesting they are. I've like watched. I haven't seen them live. I've watched a lot of live videos of them, and it's still there, but it adds an extra dimension than being live. So I don't see it as a problem, and I also see, like, musically, it's cool that they can go away and they can make their music a little bit more shiny, but then also still make something really excellent, and then go away and play it live, and it has a different dimension that's also good. Like, those two things can still exist in parallel, I think. But yeah, I don't really have too much to like add to what you guys have said. I think Tom's comparison to Tony Hawk's is really interesting, because I was thinking, like, there were moments that were like rancid and things like that, but then there's other moments which are much bigger, like hair metal moments. And then...
Oh, you're really endearing me now.
They also have, like, other moments which are, like, weird breakdowns, which are, like, almost Caribbean music or something like that. And it's just, like, all melted together. And
I think... Sorry, carry on. I thought you were finished.
I think...
Carry on.
I think the last thing I was saying, we haven't even talked about that 45-second vignette of a song at the end, which is just, I think, just a fantastic kind of breath of fresh air to just kind of carry the album out. It's really like very delicate and pretty, and to sit that amongst everything and for it to work is, I think, really impressive.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to bring up the fact that two of you talked about Tony Hawk's. I actually just dropped the Tony Hawk's line from my notes because Tom had already mentioned it. But the fact that three of us brought up Tony Hawk's in relation to an album kind of proves my point that it's a little by the book if it sounds like a Tony Hawk's soundtrack, which I think it does.
It doesn't, though.
It sounds like a really good Tony Hawk soundtrack, and Tony Hawk soundtracks were always decent, but it does sound a bit like a Tony Hawk soundtrack with some bubbly synths added on.
If you have an element of something, but then do something completely, then bolt on tons of stuff, it's like taking influences and then creating something new.
Yeah,
but
no, I'll go with that.
Yeah.
I'll go with that.
Yeah, it really also the Blood Orange feature really makes me want him to do something that's a bit more like his early days, just to see what he'd do with it now.
It'd be good for him to just do something that was, anything that had some energy in it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, anything interesting.
Yeah,
absolute slander.
No, I'm not. That was just directed at me, and I'm not going to bite. So forget it.
Well, I know you and Tom were here. I know you both like him.
Yeah.
I saw him live recently at a festival, and recently before the pandemic, it was the most boring thing I've ever seen on a stage in my entire life. It was so boring that I nearly left the festival. But anyway, let's move on.
Yes. So. You have a backup for Most by the Book, Fran?
I do.
You want to tell me what it is?
Kind of. I'm going to have to... Excuse me if I sound all over the place here, because I'm basically having to switch my notes around on an album. I wanted to start with the positives on Little Simz, Sometimes I Might Be an Introvert. I don't have many negatives, but I do have a few, and they do sort of relate to it being a little bit by the book at times. So I'll start there. I will pick the album that Tom avoided. We'll
the main event.
Simz. Yeah, I mean, I think Little Simz is the artist we've spoken most about on this podcast, and I want to get through most of my review without mentioning a previous album, because I think we've talked about it a lot, and it could hang heavy over this new one. But if I switch my notes around a little bit and talk about what my problems were and why it was a little bit by the book at times. So I love the song Misunderstood that it ends with, but I also think with the title and its basic premise, it is a little cliched. And that highlights some of the issues I have with the album. There is a lot of cliched stuff at times. I think the awful, terrible skits in particular are very, very cliched and very distracting. If I wanted the kind of advice that are on these skits, I'd just buy a self-help book, not an album by one of the most dynamic hip-hop stars in the world at the minute. Those skits are the most disruptive thing I've heard on an album in a very long time. And I'm also a little tired of the sort of cliched conceit of Simbi the person or Simbi the artist, or the parts where she talks about you didn't know it's me, I've got a twin. It pops up a lot, and I think that kind of thing has been done time and time again. It reminds me of Eminem and Slim Shady and just things that have been happening for a long time in hip hop. I think that kind of got boring a while ago. And then there's songs like Rolling Stone. The whole of that Rolling Stone song, as much as it sounds pretty good, is quite cliche. And I think, as well as being by the book in that respect, having quite a bit of cliche, it has the hip-hop trope of being a very long album that ends up having a bit too much filler. So I think Two Worlds Apart, Speed, Standing Ovation, and particularly Protect My Energy are all pretty forgettable. But all that said, these were bigger problems for me on my first couple of listens than they are now. As I sunk into the really good parts of the album, I kind of could let that go a little bit more. But they do prevent this album from being... I would have expected Little Simz' album to be a very strong contender for my album of the year. It probably might scrape the top 10, but it's not as good as I hoped it would be. It is still growing on me, though. But that's why I think it's by the book. And now I'm going to wipe everything I've just said by saying this album doesn't change my mind about Little Simz being the most exciting artist on the planet at the minute and one of the best rappers on the planet. I think she proves that time and time again on this album. I think the song I Love You, I Hate You is absolutely dynamite. It's a furious song, amazing story, a really catchy hook. I think it's an almost perfect song. I think Little Q Part 2 is gorgeous. I think it's a softer song, but with equally powerful storytelling. And I think I See You as another stunning mid-album track. I think it was quite interesting that some of these slower songs were the most successful ones on this album, because I think that's not been how I felt about her in the past. And then I think if you ignore the skits, I think the album ends amazingly. I think the run of songs from Point and Kill, Fear No Man, How Did You Get Here and Misunderstood is as good a run of songs as I've heard this year. Point and Kill is probably my favourite thing here. I love the sort of African influence. And I also love the way it transitions into Fear No Man. And then the final song, Misunderstood, I think, as much as there's some cliche there, it has my favourite point of the album in terms of a cadence. The line when she says, I just wanted you to call me saying, hey sis, how's your day been? How's your love life? Who you dating? She just sounds incredible there. So I've started with the negatives. I wanted to start with the positives. The one, and I said I wasn't going to mention Grey Area, but I am going to just mention it quickly here. I think the difference is Grey Area was addictive, and I always wanted to come back to it. I'm not there with this album, which is a bit disappointing because of those issues that I've pointed out. But like I said before, those issues stop it from being my favourite album of the year. They don't stop it from being one of my top 20 albums of the year. So it's not like I'm saying it's bad, but I do have a few issues. So yeah, that's me on Little Simz. Who wants to go?
Cool.
Shall I jump in?
Go for it,
Yeah,
Nick.
go for it, Nick.
This has actually stolen my response to the next question. So I don't know how we're going to handle that one. And I also don't have a backup, unlike Fran. So you can deal with that one, Matt, while I'm talking. I've written down that I feel like we've reached critical mass here because before anybody else says the expression, Little Simz is herself in the shadow of Little Simz right now. Grey Area is so much better than this album, and I couldn't resist saying that and feeling that all the way through. And I think the interludes that Fran references are totally correct. They were really disjointed and broke the album apart to my mind. It's not as musically punchy. It's not as lyrically direct, although it has moments of beauty and powerful sort of lyrical dexterity. It was always going to be hard to follow something that was, kind of close to flawless in Grey Area. So in that sense, I don't think my expectations were kind of unrealistic, maybe even unreasonable. But if I'm honest, I was quite disappointed. That's why it was the most unexpected to me, because I really thought I'm going to love this album. And in the end, I think it's good. I think Fran is also dead right. This is twice I've complimented Fran in the last minute. That's what's going on.
Uh-oh.
Fucking hell. I think he's dead right that she's still a powerful, powerful talent. And I'll be watching everything she puts out. I also saw her in Top Boy recently. I started watching Top Boy on Netflix, by the way, and she's really good in that as well, if anyone's seen it.
I've not watched it
No,
yet,
she's really good in it. She's just an incredible talent. And this is if it wasn't for Grey Area, I would think this. I would say unequivocally this is a really, really strong album. But it isn't. Grey Area exists, and she's coming off that. This is not quite there. So a little bit of a pity, but still definitely worth a listen. Anyone who has not come across it yet, I strongly advise you to do so. That's all I'd say.
Cool. Well, I might jump in here real quick and just say I think I agree with a lot of what you've said, which annoys me. But I think that, and similar to Fran, there is a good album in here. It's just not constructed in the most cohesive way. It is broken up. There's some fantastic songs, but there's also some songs that don't fit. The real, if we're going to do the comparison with not just Grey Area, but Drop 6, the really fantastic EP she released after that. These songs, this album doesn't grab you immediately. It's dropped the aggression and gone for a more expansive sound, which it's cool and I'm down for. But as a result, some of the songs which are more aggressive don't fit, like Rolling Stone and Speed. They just don't. There's no juxtaposition next to them that works. Especially when you have these interludes, which are just taking all the momentum away. But I do like the fact that she's leaning into her storytelling. She's switching up the kind of samples she's using, and they're more soulful and warm, and leaning is less beat driven. And I think she obviously has the capacity to do that. Fran mentioned, I've forgotten the exact line that he mentioned, but that was one that also stuck out to me as well. And I'd always get excited when it came up to that song at the end that had that line about her sister.
Fantastic.
Yeah, like her storytelling and lyrically, she's so strong. But it's just different. And I think the way she also employed strings in this was super effective as well. And so it has just an entirely different vibe. So it's like Grey Area and this, or Grey Area and Drop 6 are one thing. This is something else. And I don't think they're really... It's really hard to compare them as like which one's better as a result. I do think that there's some fat that needs to be cut from this album, but it could potentially, if they did that, it would be on the same level at least. But yeah, and I'm still going to be reaching to Grey Area, I think, and Drop 6 when I want to listen to Simz most of the time.
Okay, yeah, Tom, we need unrivaled positivity from you, Tom. We need totally positive review now, please.
Do you know what? I am actually going to agree with a lot of what you've all said. I reviewed Grey Area for the website. It was only the third review I wrote for Picky Bastards, and like I was on board with the kind of editorial line that it was a really strong album. But if there's kind of like a criticism I had of Grey Area, it would be it's obviously like it's kind of a short, concise album. It's only 35 minutes long, and for the next album, I wanted something with a bit more kind of experimentalism and a bit more kind of ambition, I guess. So I thought when I first heard the two singles off this album, the first two songs, Introvert and Woman, I absolutely loved them. I thought they were the best things she'd ever done. I loved the production, the strings which have been mentioned by Matt, and like the little voicemail at the end of Woman, which kind of indicates there's like a wider theme. But you're absolutely right about the interludes. They're way too long. They've got no repeat value. I'm not against the idea of having an interlude or a series of interludes in an album to kind of tie the theme together. But
who does good interludes is Blood Orange. Just putting it out there.
Tom will agree with that. Good interludes, crap music. But one of Little Simz' interludes on this album, sorry Tom, just on the point you're making, it's 3.5 minutes long. And when is an interlude an interlude, and when is it not an interlude if it's 3.5 minutes long? It's longer than some of the good songs on the album, which is just bizarre to me.
Sorry, exactly.
Carry on, Tom.
No, you're right. There must be about 15 minutes in total of just interludes on this thing. But yeah, I agree with what you said. There's some really great songs on here, like the things you said about Point and Kill and Fear No Man. The way those two songs tie together, they're two really clear highlights for me. And I think it is kind of something that comes with making a more ambitious and longer album. That there are more pitfalls. Like there's more filler on this album. Obviously, like you said with Grey Area, there's almost no filler on that. It's just such a tight, concise album. And the songs Speed and Rolling Stone didn't work for me either. So I did, but I mean, it's kind of similar to what you've all said. Like I sound like I'm being negative, but I still thought it was a really strong album, and it's kind of testament to how consistent Little Simz is. That we're kind of digging holes in what is still a very strong album, and it's an album that gets a big thumbs up for me. So yeah.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about while you all were speaking, and also while I was writing my notes, was if this was an album by some artist we'd never heard of, I think we'd all be going fucking mad about it. Yep. Like we'd all be so excited about it, and we'd be like, well, there's some problems with the album, but this person isn't. And I think what I want to just end by saying it is, fantastic. It's just I wish she'd just been a bit more sort of a bit more cutthroat with it, and I wish she'd made up what album she wanted it to be, because I feel like one of the things I thought was the interlude sort of break up what is maybe 3 EPs on this album, and I feel like there's 2 really strong EPs and 1 EP that I just don't really like that much, and I think that maybe I just wish she'd been a little more cutthroat. I thought when grey area was so to the point and cutthroat that it felt like she wasn't fitting into those tropes of hip hop of having overly long albums full of stuff you don't need, but this does have that. So yeah, we now need to invite Sam on to talk about it, because he would just rave about it, and we could be positive. But we love you, Little Simz. If you ever listen to us, we do love you.
I'm sure it's top of our list.
I think it's only because the expectations are so high.
Yeah.
To be honest, it makes me even more excited for the next album, because she's expanded her like the way she's doing the music so much that if she can then find that happy medium, it's going to be mega. It'll just be ridiculous.
Mega.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Where are we going?
Well, let's go to Nick.
Hold on, I refuse to answer the question you asked.
You've answered the question I was going to ask.
The question already.
What album were you most excited to play out of the remaining?
Well, I can't say in advance because I didn't really know any of them, but I'll go with, I'll go with Quickly. I thought this really was, there's not often I would say that I genuinely think an album is a bit hard to pin down in terms of genre and style, and I think this album was a really interesting exercise in moving around different styles and genres. It was really layered and complex and subtle at many points. It was also kind of joyous some of the time, which I can be persuaded to like occasionally, surprisingly. There was most of it I really, really liked. I think possibly She, SHEE, was my favourite track on it. And I think it really showed the true kind of potential of what I kind of understand is a small-scale bedroom production operation from my very limited understanding of this size.
That's right.
And you know, being honest, as somebody who does that myself, that it kind of gave me sense there's hope for us all. You know, if that can be done in these kind of small scale spaces, then I think that's really empowering and really sort of there's a very egalitarian direction there to have people out there making these kind of small scale. I mean, you could obviously say even Billie Eilish's album was like that as well, but you know, all the way up to the top of the biggest pop artists these days. But still, it's nice to see people making small scale albums that are both quality in terms of production, you know, solid quality, or not necessarily the finest you could get, but solid, but also interesting movement, interesting structures and stuff like that. So I really, really enjoyed it. That's all I would say on that.
I thought you'd hate this album. I thought you'd hate it.
Really?
I really thought you'd hate it.
Wow.
So that's quite interesting.
So much to learn about me, Fran, after all these years.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say about it, yeah, so go ahead.
I'll jump in because I have some similar kind of thoughts. I thought it was really... I thought you would like it because it is so layered and there's so many... I feel like what they've added in, there's all these just sounds and it feels so like they have so much texture to them. It sounds very rich, even though they're like only small little things here and there, and it just adds to this big atmosphere of warmth and kind of dreaminess that floats on by. I genuinely really this was my biggest surprise because I had no idea who they were, and I really enjoyed this album quite a lot. I think you mentioned She, and just that also stood out for me because of the way that the drums kicked in at some point. They were very visceral. It was almost like a heartbeat or something. It sounded really like a throbbing in the center of the song. And there were just lots of little moments like that, like little pieces of piano here and there where I was just like, oh, I really like that. Or just like a little sound that got added that I just got really into.
It makes me want to interject one quick thing, which is a part of that layering and all those little drops in the piano and stuff is that use I've referenced before of making the studio like an instrument, you know, like is building tracks out of these small both samples and elements that are not sort of, you don't sit down and play the song, you know, you don't sit down with a guitar and play the song and then start building it, you know, and I think he's a great example of exactly that kind of songwriting. So sorry, I cut you off there, carry on.
No, that's exactly it. It's like, it doesn't feel like one specific thing is coming at you. It's just this just being washed away by the song, and it adds this intimacy to it that I really like. I think the biggest issue I had with it is I liked his voice. His voice was pretty generic, though, and there were points where I was like, I've heard a lot of people do similar things to this, but then again, they're doing it really, really well. So is that necessarily a problem? But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Right, Fran or Tom, either of you particularly want to jump in?
I feel like there's been too much agreement on this podcast so far, so I'm going to jump in and say this is probably my least favourite album on the list. I don't want to knock like a young bedroom producer, because it's obviously very well produced, but while musically it's kind of jazzy and chilled and pleasant, I found it almost completely forgettable. Each time I listened, I found quite a bit to enjoy on some of the early tracks, like Come Visit Me and She, which you've both mentioned, but I quickly tired of it. I found it lyrically quite weak, like the song Why, where he just kind of moans about a few things that you should probably like nausea and blurred vision, and just like okay. And I thought the love songs as well sounded a bit too saccharine. So She, which is one of the better songs on the album, it's got this line like she couldn't be more lovely. I hear the sun when she speaks, which just sounds sickly. And just, I mean, I'm actually absolutely going in on this album. It's not even that bad an album, but it's just.
We need it. The group needs it. We've got too much agreement, so go for it. Unleash that stuff.
Yeah, just finally, I mean, the guy's voice it might just be his normal voice, but he has this kind of affected, like, laid-back tone, which I found quite annoying. So basically, like, I wasn't a fan, and I can't really. It's got quite a lot of positive reviews, so I couldn't really understand that. But you've got a lot out of it so far.
I mean, you've just had a go at him for being there's a whole song about him being a hypochondriac and how he struggled with that his whole life, and you've just basically bollocked him for that. You've just like, get over yourself, mate. Fuck you and your illnesses.
Pull your socks up, yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe I was just in a short temper when I heard this album each time, but yeah, I wasn't overly taken with it.
Next time you tell me you've got a headache, I'm going to tell you to fuck off.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me.
I am glad Tom jumped in though, because Nick and a little bit of Matt said it's pretty much exactly what I'm going to say. It was a bit of a mystifying record to me. Even now, I think I'm still making my mind up about it. Like Nick said, I can't pin it down to a genre. I think it's got elements of jazz, elements of hip-hop, parts when it was very bedroom pop sort of delivery, and then times when it sounded like something that was a bit DJ Shadow-ish, a bit sample heavy, even though I know it's not samples, it's all him. I think it's a pretty bizarre mix of genre and styles. And even though Matt's just said he knows a lot of people who are doing stuff like this, for me, it isn't like anything I've really spent any time with before. That isn't to say it's that incredibly unique or original. It might be, I don't know. It's just that I'm not aware of a lot of stuff like this. And I usually take it as a good sign when I listen to an album and I can't directly compare it to someone. For me, that usually means they're doing something right. And I think that's what it means here, because most of the time I did enjoy listening to this. It was something I was happy to play in pretty much any situation. I never felt the need to skip it. But then actually what Tom's just said about it being forgettable, I can see that as well, because it never totally drew me in. And at other times, I kind of wondered if it was like a really good version of lift music. Like, it would be a lift.
Everything positive you've just said, you can just bin right now, because you just killed it in 2 words, lift music.
It'd be a lift I'd really like to be in, and I'd probably stay in that lift for a while, and it'd be quite a relaxing lift, but it would still be a lift at the end of the day. And I think I say that because despite it feeling fresh in some ways, there aren't many parts of it that stand out from what surrounds it on the album. I feel like it all melds in a little bit. I think the songs Leave It and I Am Close to the River did always grab my attention and stood out, but the rest kind of was a little bit samey. So I think in summary, I'm saying it was different but all the same. It was interesting but a bit boring. And a bit one note, apart from the bits that were a bit of a different note. So I don't really know what I think about it. But I didn't hate it and I didn't love it.
Nice.
That's me.
Nice.
Cool. Right.
Well,
let's switch over. I'm gonna kick us off.
Yeah, you should
and we're going to talk about Lorde.
Okay.
Can I just ask, is it not Lorde? I've been calling it Lorde for years.
I don't
Why has she got an
know.
E on the end of her name?
I thought it was Lorde.
The only way I know how to pronounce stuff is by listening to the radio, which I don't do anymore. So anything that came out in the past 10 years, I have no idea how to pronounce.
Tom, you picked
I thought
it.
Lorde was that band from the Eurovision from Finland, that metal band with all the weird suits. They're Lorde, aren't they?
I don't know because I don't watch Eurovision.
Oh, you're missing out. Tell Sam to say that, he'd punch you.
It's definitely Lorde, I think.
Okay. I'm going to call her Lorde.
Go for it. I'm sure word will get to her and she'll get very upset.
Probably.
But yeah, so this album wasn't what I expected at all. I've only heard a couple of her songs in the past, like what has reached me through it being played a lot on radios and things like that, and you hear in the supermarket. Mm-hmm. And I quite liked her brand of pop, but this didn't feel like this felt very different to that. I could be completely way off base with that statement, but I don't know. That said, that doesn't mean it was a good thing. This, it wildly swang for me between being like, oh, this is cool, to, God, she's really annoying. And I couldn't make my mind up between those kind of two like polar opposites. At times, I kept wanting to compare this to like 90s pop folk, like The Cause and things like that. And there were moments I would be like not paying attention and be really enjoying it. And then as soon as I added a spotlight onto what the actual music was going on, I was just like, oh, this is actually very annoying. And that's, I think, because it was so like syrupy in moments, to use a favourite descriptor that Nick uses.
That's my word, that's not allowed.
Yeah, I'm stealing it before you can. I think the worst crimes for this was to do with the backing vocals. Often the backing vocals were used in a way that just was too much. But I think the thing I found most annoying was actually when I paid attention, I'd hear the lyrics, and some of the lyrics were just so irritating. And I think it was just this kind of almost self-aggrandizing way that she'd talk about herself, in the sense that she's all grown, and is she like 22 or something?
She's a prettier Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She's a prettier Jesus. She's a hellraiser. She's saying this song will show you the path.
Her name's Lorde, for God's sake. We just established that, didn't we?
Yeah, she's saying she's the girl that's seen it all. And I'm just like, I am how old am I? I'm 31. I have got a lot of growing to do. And for her, maybe she has figured life out and figured everything out. But I doubt it. And I get that especially as a young female artist, trying to grow from being like teenage pop into something that's more adult, that can be a very tough transition. And it feels like that's what she's trying to do. But it for me, being the one that knows everything isn't necessarily the solution to that. And so that's why I got really annoyed by it.
I'll jump in, I think. Well, first of all, what I would say, just to one of Matt's points there about it sounding like someone growing from teenage pop. Actually, her previous two albums, it's not usually my type of thing, but the previous two albums are actually, I would say, they're much more sort of developed and mature sounding than this. I don't mean that as a patronising word, but they're much more sort of, the music is more mature, and this album isn't. I'll go as far as saying that this album is an absolute turd of an album, and I don't really believe anyone who says they feel differently to that. So if any of you say you like it, you're lying. I read a few reviews about how this was meant to be a satire or a takedown of the wellness industry, and that annoyed me in the first place. I mean, how fucking privileged do you have to be to write an album in 2021 about taking down the wellness industry, where we've got rampant fascism and racism, we've got attacks on women's rights, we've got transphobia, we've got genocide, we've got a fucking worldwide pandemic, and Lorde wants to write a negative album about people who like to exercise on the beach. So fuck her in the first instance. That's just ridiculous.
Oh, that's the best comment you've ever made, Fred. That's fantastic. Nice one.
But the worst thing about that as a concept in regards to this album is that it doesn't sound like satire at all. It sounds like a celebration of the industry that she's trying to take down. Satire is meant to have jokes and clever wordplay. Lorde just starts songs like Dominoes with lines like, I heard that you were doing yoga with Uma Thurman's mother just outside of Woodstock. I mean, maybe that's a joke, but I don't get it at all if it is. So, yeah, maybe I'd get past some of this privileged, self-absorbed nonsense if the songs weren't horrible, but they're also really wishy-washy and uninteresting. Dominoes is probably the worst offender, but there are plenty of other horrible, bland, boring songs. Stoned at the Nail Salon, for example. And Matt's just mentioned Secrets for a Girl Who's Seen It All. Oh, God, that song gets my back up so badly. Maybe it's satire, but it just screams I love myself. And if it is satire, it doesn't land because it isn't funny or interesting. And then I'm not going to go on for much longer, but let's just talk about Solar Power, the title song. It's probably the biggest achievement on the album, actually, because it managed to sound like an exact rip-up of Primal Scream, George Michael, and the Rolling Stones all at one go, and also features inane lines like, lead the boys and girls onto the beaches, come on, come all, I'll tell you all my secrets, I'm kind of like a pretty Jesus. I mean, this is either the writing of a dickhead, or the writing of someone who writes satire so badly that they've turned into a dickhead. And like I say, I rated her previous albums. I think they're very, very good. I think they're, fucking amazing albums in a lot of ways for what they are. They're not, I might not personally listen to them regularly, but they are amazing albums. But this album is just a massive turd. So if anyone's positive about it, let's go to them.
I just want to say, there are many reasons I wanted to be in this podcast and got this podcast going with Fran and with Normal, and one of the main ones was to listen to people slate albums as viciously as that, because that is so satisfying to hear. And whether I agree or not, that's not relevant. It's just amazing to hear somebody rip the shit out of an album like that. That is hilarious.
Well, I appreciate that. I could do that in your last episode for a while.
Exactly. Yeah. So, anyway,
but I feel like we could do some
Matt,
positivity. Do either of you like the album, Tom or Nick? Do you dare admit it now?
Following that, wow. I thought that this is one of those big name albums which, in fact, my very first note on here is this is one of those big name albums which elicits extreme reactions. Either it's the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. And I kind of don't think either's true. Like, I think her previous album that you mentioned, Fran, Melodrama, that was really hailed. Like when it came out, as like almost like she was like Lorde was like the voice of her generation kind of thing, like teenagers of that age. And like I liked the album, but I didn't think it was anywhere near as good as some of the kind of breathless praise that it got. And likewise, I don't think this album is quite as bad as some of the negative reviews it's got. Like, I actually quite like the sound palette of kind of distorted, melancholy kind of sounding guitars, which kind of like evoke summer. I didn't know anything about the satire stuff. I haven't done my research on this one, but just in terms of pure sound, like I quite liked some of the I guess like sound choices that were made, and I actually thought it started quite well, like the songs The Path and Solar Power. I mean, I've not really listened to Primal Scream, so maybe in ignorance is bliss, because I quite like that song. But my problem with the album was that it just doesn't really go anywhere. Like, the songs kind of sound like these kind of skeletal ideas which just haven't been fleshed out. It sounds as if like she got too attached to the demo versions of the songs and just didn't bother kind of developing them. So like California seems like it should have like this like massive chorus, but it just doesn't. It just kind of meanders for about 3 or 4 minutes and then just ends. And then some of the other songs, like Stoned at the Nail Salon, The Man with the Axe, and Big Star, are just kind of like low-key like acoustic numbers, but I really couldn't tell you which one's which, even though I've listened to it like a dozen times. And it kind of sounds like this is quite an old school reference, but it sounds like an MTV unplugged version of the actual album. Like it just sounds like the songs have just been completely stripped back, and where's the like production on it? And I quite like the song Mood Ring towards the end of the album, but that might be just because it sounds like a finished song rather than an unfinished idea. So it was a disappointment for me. Not quite to the extent of Fran's.
That's not really possible, is it? To be honest with you, to that degree.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, I think
no, you're not.
I think there are the bones of like something that could be a bit better here, and there's a bit right at the end of the last song, Oceanic Feeling, which is, again, it just kind of meanders and doesn't go anywhere. But then it just suddenly changes for the last minute, and it's actually like quite melancholy and wistful, and there's like a bit of a duet, and it's probably actually my favorite bit on the album, and it's like the last 50 seconds of it, and it just kind of indicates what could have been if she kind of took more risks or developed these ideas more. So disappointment for me.
After talking about Quickly's lyrics, though, Tom, I just wonder, how do you feel about the lyric, "I heard that you were doing yoga with Uma Thurman's mother just outside of Woodstock"? Where do you stand on that?
I think that is like that song is like the nadir of this album. That Dominoes, it's and that song "Secrets from a Girl Who's Seen It All" are really quite cheesy and stuff. But I think the bits that I liked about this album were more to do with the sound. But there are some cringy lyrics on here.
Nick loved it.
Okay, so this is probably my album of the year. No. I just thought there was two artists that came to mind as we were talking through that I hadn't actually even written notes down about as yet. And one was so Matt referenced The Cause. So I'll just say lyrically, Fran's dead on. It's absolute bag of shit. So no question. but I just really wanted to focus on the musical problems with it rather than the lyrical ones, because there's nothing to redeem the lyrics really from my point of view. But the musical issues are to do with this. The fact that you referenced The Cause, Matt, was so interesting. That band. And I remember from the 90s, they were like basically overkill on harmonies, like a ridiculous, like all three of them, I think all three of them, possibly all four of them, doing harmonies simultaneously on every single fucking song. And this was like that. Like there was just so much bloody Lorde on this album. It was just too much fucking Lorde. Every single song was 10 of her, you know?
Do you know what, though? A lot of the time it isn't. She's got some amazing people doing the backing vocals.
No, I don't mean that. I know what you mean, but I mean production-wise, they've also doubled and tripled and quadrupled her actual track.
Okay, I get you.
So she sounds fucking huge. And it's so pop, of course. I understand that's a trope of pop, but it's very, very distancing from anything that she actually wants to say. Not as you said, that it's worth hearing. But but in any case, musically, it's very unaffecting when musicians do that, and I always have a real problem with it, you know. And then the other person that occurred to me just as we were talking was Billie Eilish, because we talked about her for Albums of the Year last year, wasn't it? Or the year before now?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, Jesus. And obviously both young stars thrust into the spotlight, both considered to be kind of groundbreaking in various ways. And I think it's an interesting comparison. To me, the Billie Eilish first album, at least, was so much stronger than this album in so many ways. Her voice is nicer, the singing is better, the production is better, even though, as I said earlier, it was done mostly at home. The songwriting construction is better, the lyrics seem to me to be moderately more interesting. She just no comparison at all. And I think that's quite interesting, given that they've both got a huge amount of praise and a huge amount of talk about the two of them as these kind of young leaders in the pop field. And then the one last thing I'll say is they used a phaser a lot on this, which I'll talk about more when we get to Cocteau Twins. It's a 90s effect, of an effect that was very in favour, in sort of very cool in the 90s. And they used it on Fallen Fruit from the very start of the album, in fact. And I found it very oddly dating of the album, which I just kind of distracting. But anyway, that'll come back in the Cocteau Twins comments in a minute. But yeah, just wanted to mention that one.
Have you listened to the previous Lorde albums, Nick?
I have not, no.
Yeah, I really recommend giving them a go, because I think, in terms of the Billie Eilish comparison, I think it is an interesting one, because I think the previous two Lorde albums, I totally understand why they're so... And I think maybe that's why I'm so irate about this one, because actually I took a long time to listen to those albums. I listened to them both last year and really rated them.
But would you hold them up to Billie Eilish, just out of interest? Knowing them both better
Personally,
than I do.
I think that... I can't remember which way around it is. Tom might help me here. Which one's first and which one's second from Lorde? Is it?
Yeah, so there's one called Pure Romance, is it? The first one from 2013.
It's Pure Heroin and Melodrama, I think, the two.
Pure Heroin. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
One of them, I can't remember which. One of them is much more my thing than Billie Eilish.
Oh, really?
I think Billie Eilish is fantastic, but I think it's something I would sit and listen to more regularly.
Interesting. Yeah.
They're worth listening to anyway.
Yep, we'll do.
Cool. I'm tempted to re-listen to it now with this idea that it's all satire, because that changes everything. Basically, I didn't get the joke, and that's all of my criticisms were. I didn't get the joke.
If failed, then you get the joke, don't you? So it's good. You don't need to fucking re-listen once you realise it's satire. So she's failed, and also the satire isn't good. I knew it was satire because I'd seen reviews that told me that. That's the only reason I knew, and that shouldn't be how it works.
I also hate the wellness industry, so yeah.
Yeah, but is it as important a thing to write about as, like, you know...
Taliban versus wellness industry. Let's do a quick vote, shall we? A quick poll.
Oh no, these people are doing yoga. Let's write an album about it.
Well, yeah. I'll tell you my thoughts on the wellness industry another time, but I do think they are essentially a branch of fascism. So
you are actually going to make the case that the Taliban is sort of in the same ballpark?
For some parts, like anti-vax movement, stuff like that, all comes from wellness movement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not what she's satire. She's not talking about that.
Derailing
she's talking
this
about people
podcast
doing
right now.
yoga with Uma Thurman. She's not talking about people being anti-vax. That's the difference.
We are seriously derailing this podcast in an unprecedented way if we keep this conversation going like this.
Should we get Tom to talk about the classic?
Tom, do you want to start with Cocteau Twins?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping this one goes a bit better than the other one. I mean, I picked Lorde and Cocteau Twins, so we'll see if this one went down any better. But yeah, a number of my favourite artists have been inspired by Cocteau Twins, so it's probably no surprise that I absolutely love this album. I mean, there's a band like Beach House who I'm a big fan of. They sound just like this album, and like Beach House are like, I really love their work in their own right, but it's just really interesting to join the dots because they're so heavily influenced by the sound of this Cocteau Twins album. I went online to try and find out what they were saying, and the first comment on Genius just said, "Man, what the fuck did the Cocteau Twins be saying?" So that kind of indicates that it's not about the lyrics. But I kind of realised from that it doesn't even matter for me anyway. It's all about the melodies and the instrumentation and the atmosphere that they kind of create over these 10 songs. Every song sounds kind of familiar, even though I'm sure I've never heard this album before. So it's kind of hard to pick out. It's kind of hard to pick out particular bits because the record just kind of flows without any need to. Well, obviously, need to dwell on the lyrics because I'm pretty sure they're either nonsensical or they're extremely cryptic. I'm not sure there's too much to read into with it. But it's an album that I'm glad that I've finally heard, and I'll have it on rotation in the future. And it kind of reminds me, just joining the dots with some of the bands that I'm a big fan of. It reminds me of when I discovered like bands like Joy Division when I was a teenager. After listening to like post-punk music for a lot of my teenage years, like it's just interesting to almost trace back the influence that influenced a lot of my the bands I really like. So yeah, big thumbs up for me, and I'm assuming it was a big thumbs up all around after the Lorde conversation.
Yeah, let's assume everyone loved it. We just moved on. That's fine.
Move on.
4 positive votes there. Who wants to go next?
Come on, Fran.
Okay. Interestingly, Tom started with something that I was going to say as well. I'd actually been toying of picking this as the classic for quite a long time myself. I think I did pick it as the classic at one point, and then I changed my mind at the last minute because I see the album being spoken about an awful lot on Twitter and social media by people who I generally agree with, and also a lot of bands that I really like do talk about them as a band that was extremely influential for them. So I expected it to be a hugely successful classic album for me, but it really wasn't at all. Like I didn't come away hating it as I have with other classics, but that's mainly because it couldn't really garner that level of emotion in me. I just found it very, very wishy-washy. I've used wishy-washy 3 times in this podcast. I think the mix doesn't seem to forward anything, so you just kind of get a big sludgy lump of guitars and drums and vocals, and nothing stands out. And for me, in the same way that nothing stood out on the individual songs, that meant none of the individual songs then stood out across the album. There's no one moment that feels like the centre point, or a single, or a moment that makes me sort of take notice. It just kind of muddles along all the way through. So I don't have a lot more to say other than that, really. It's just another classic album that I'm left struggling to understand the fuss about, without totally hating it and without finding it unlistenable in any way. You know, it was pleasant enough to listen to at times, but I just felt a bit meh at the end of it. Really, it didn't do a lot to grab me. Sorry, Tom.
No, that's fine by me.
Okay, I'll jump in. It's not fine by you at all. You're seething, Tom. I can hear it in your voice.
Fuming.
So yeah, I think this is one of the better classics we've done. I enjoyed it. I thought it had some really dated musical cliches, and this is where I'm coming back to this comment made about the Lorde, the phaser, use of phaser, this guitar effect that's like was all over stuff in the 90s, and it does that sound. Was both a good thing and a bad thing, because A, it made it feel like, wow, this is definitely a 90s album, but B,
wasn't it 89?
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm 1 year out. I feel terrible, it made me feel a great deal of nostalgia for music of this period, even though I'd never heard the album before, which was something a bit like, I think Tom said something similar. He kind of felt like he'd heard it before in a way, but not through the more recent bands, but just from remembering bands of that period. Because I'm ancient, and just feeling like that sort of dreaminess of it, that drift of it, which Fran is sort of being derogatory towards, which I think actually is quite delicate and beautiful in many points. I think, that, for example, Ice Blink Luck, I think it is called, was probably like the strongest song on the album to me, and I guess it kind of, for me, what was interesting was it still held up. So I have heard various over the years bands from that period I've come back to and felt quite disappointed, like, oh wow, what was all the fuss about? I didn't know this band at the time, but hearing them now, I feel like the songs, the melodies do actually hold up. I think the tracks, decent enough. They're not absolutely mind-blowing, but they're decent enough. Even if you remove those things, those very stylized effects which were in fashion at the time, you still have songs which I think are solid. So all in all, I enjoyed it. I'm glad you picked it, Tom. So thank you. And Fran's wrong.
Cool.
My pleasure.
Yeah. I'm not sure about this album. I've gone back and forth about it. I thought there's some really interesting parts. The way the vocals are done is super interesting. Like, it feels almost like they're auto-tuned or something like that.
It was auto-tuned, was it?
I don't know. There's something weird going on with them, but the way that it stretches the voice feels like it's doing something akin to autotune, or like that the shifting of the pitch.
Yeah, could be.
But it might just be the way they sing, and it doesn't sound exactly the same as that anyway. But it kind of fits with the way they play the guitar as well. It all fits together to make it more like the voice as an instrument as opposed to the centerpiece, and that makes sense why they don't care about you hearing it, like Tom says. Like, lyrics for this don't matter, which normally for me is a good thing, but like for this, I found it again, like Fran said, there were points where I just didn't have anything to hold on to. And that's also because I found that, like, musically, this dreamy atmosphere they created, it felt very thin. It didn't feel like, I know this is like, they're very different, but in Quickly, that also had a dreamy vibe, but it felt very like visceral and it's something to hold on to, even though it was dreamy. This felt just like it was just musically, it was there, but it didn't feel like there was much behind it. Like I could just push it and it would fall over. I found the comparison to Beach House very interesting, because I listened to Beach House a lot and I didn't link them. I can say, like, I guess they have a similar vibe. The atmosphere and the vibe is very similar, but I musically, I didn't link the two, but maybe I need to do another listen. And I liked the opening track a lot, but I feel like the opening track had just a bit more going, a bit more of a center to it, and then everything after that just drifts into this cloud, which was fine, and it wasn't a bad experience, but it also wasn't something I was excited about.
Yes, I would agree with that final line.
Yeah.
No, I would disagree with that final line.
Was it exciting then? Are you going to say this was an exciting album, Nick?
It was a trip down memory lane, which I find exciting.
See,
most of us can't remember those years.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, and you're going to go there.
It almost sounded shoegazy, I thought, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Considering
and I don't like shoegaze, so that's probably
like the guitars didn't sound shoegazy, but the songs sounded shoegazy.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, it sounded a bit like My Bloody Valentine at times.
Absolutely, which is a fantastic band.
Yeah.
Right. First album, then the Cocteau Twins.
Well, shall we?
Literally, the sigh was forget the comment. Just the sigh was amazing. Fran's like, oh, I'm so sick of this shit.
Playlist as a whole,
Yeah,
rather than
go
just
for it.
the disappointment.
Go for it.
Well, I thought this was pretty solid. Like, there was some albums that I really liked in this, and there were a few which I was like meh about. But I'd say it's middling to average, middling above average.
I'd go slightly
for
above
me.
average myself. I think Turnstile, absolute joke. Quickly, really liked it. Lorde, write that shit off. Little Simz was disappointing. Cocteau Twins I quite enjoyed. So yeah, more than 50% of them were decent. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was an interesting playlist more than it was a great playlist. Even the albums I didn't love on this list, I quite enjoyed. I mean, I love just getting to slag Lorde off. That was fun. So,
So did I. I loved you enjoying that as well.
It was fun to do. So, yeah. I mean, the only album that I'll listen to again is Little Simz.
Turnstile.
I'll be skipping it. Turnstile I liked. I did like Turnstile. Yeah, I like quickly as well. So it was a decent playlist. But yeah, Tom, what did you think?
Yeah, I'm comparing it to the playlist from 2 years ago, which had JPEG Mafia on it and One True Pairing and Microwave. Yeah, I mean, I quite enjoyed this one. I enjoyed some of the albums here. I thought the Little Simz and Turnstile albums were good. I really like the Cocteau Twins one. But yeah, the Lorde and the Quickly one, not so great. But yeah, glad I got to listen to them, but I've listened to some of those albums more than enough for this year, I think. So.
Yeah.
Can anyone remember a single Microwave song while we're talking about that previous playlist?
No,
I can't.
I can't remember that band. I just vaguely remember the name. Jesus.
I've spent a long time during this, while we've been talking, trying to remember. I remember liking one of the songs quite a lot, but I don't even know what my final verdict was on that, because I definitely didn't listen to it again.
Trust me, over the last 44 episodes, there were so many bands I just don't remember who the fuck they were. Fran will say, you already did that one. I'm like, oh, right, okay, I forgot now.
Yeah, so many that I said I really liked and I'll go back to, and then never
heard it again. Yeah.
Anyway, this conversation for another time.
Yeah, there's we got one thing left to do, and that's going to be talking about Nicholas Jaar, which hopefully Tom enjoyed because he selected it.
And made the playlist.
That would be a first if somebody picked their thing as the why I hate. That's amazing. I mean, breaking new ground. Consider taking that idea forward after I've gone.
Yeah.
Ooh, we could do a why I hate section.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on, Tom.
You're excited now.
Why I hate. So for this why I love, I wanted to pick an artist who I was pretty sure wouldn't be featured in this section, or either like in future podcasts. So for those that don't know, I'm speaking to the listeners out there. Nicholas Jaar's a Chilean American musician. His music's kind of hard to categorize. He emerged at the start of the 2010s as part of this wave of kind of oddball electronic artists who seemed kind of as much influenced by like traditional and like classical music as much as the kind of trendy underground dance music. James Blake is probably the most notable one, who I know Fran's a big fan of.
Oh yeah, I love him. I love paint drying too.
But unlike James Blake, Nicholas Jaar's kind of stayed away from mainstream collaborations. So he's pursued a number of different musical directions under different aliases. So for the people out there, our thousands of listeners who may not listen to the playlist, I put together a 6-song playlist to try and capture the range of what Nicholas Jaar does. So I went from the kind of the minimalist end of his work to more maximalist, like big, like long, like kind of epic tracks. So I started with like a song called Etcher from his debut album Space Is Only Noise, which is this it's a really strange album. It's really minimalist, it's kind of ambient and experimental, and on this song you can kind of hear like a gentle piano while some people are talking in French, and then there's like the sound of like an insect was like fluttering its wings, and there's like a baby laughing in the background. And I think the song's meant to like evoke his childhood, but rather than like write a song where he just like kind of it's got lyrics essentially, it kind of does it in this kind of soothing and abstract way. And I really love the album. Like it is such a strange mix of sounds and like electronic touches, and then like bits of like almost like classical music. And it's one of my favorite like vinyl records to put on, because it's just kind of almost like meditative just to listen to it. And then also on the playlist, I've put a couple of songs from the Dark Side album, which is another of his aliases. It's a collaboration with him. The album's called Psychic, and it's a collaboration with a guy called Dave Harrington, who's a musician, but also one of his friends from university. And that's like a cross between electronic music and almost like prog rock. And that is also like an amazing album. I've put the songs Golden Arrow and Freak Go Home on there. And then, I picked a song from the Against All Logic alias, which is, again, different again. It's like a straight house music project. And it's almost like him just showing you that, like, he can make just really these big, catchy club bangers if he wants to, but he tends to just kind of pursue the directions that he's interested in. And then there's yet another. This guy's got so many aliases. Like there's a cover of the Leonard Cohen and also made famous by Nick Cave song Avalanche. It's under an alias called Just Friends, and that's him and Steven Spielberg's daughter, Sasha Spielberg, who does the vocals. Yeah,
really?
I can't believe that when I discovered that. And then I've ended with a final song under his own name, which is 13 minutes long, and it's called Swim. I'm intrigued to know what you all think of that one. But yeah, it's this absolutely sprawling, like massive, like dance track kind of thing. But what I tried to show with the playlist is how he has such a command of his craft. So he clearly understands music right down to like the way it's constructed. So he uses like silence as like a canvas to build these songs from almost nothing into these either still quite minimal compositions or these like massive house tracks. And I find them in like all of his stuff like fascinating to listen to and completely compelling just because of the way they're put together. And he's got this kind of understanding of like rhythm and pacing and that kind of thing. He did I don't know if any of you are familiar with like the Essential Mix series on Radio 1, but he did one in 2012, which is incredible. It's got such a range of music on it. It's not just like dance music. It's also got like there's like a sample from it starts with like a sample of the guy who did the soundtrack to Twin Peaks, like describing how he makes music, and it's just the way he's got like bits of NSYNC in there, and then he's got a bit of like classical piano music, and like violins and stuff, and it's amazing. Almost to underline the kind of respect that other musicians have for him. FKA Twigs basically enlisted him to co-produce a lot of her Magdalene album in 2019 now, I think it was, and that. You can kind of see, if you're familiar with his music, you can kind of see his prints all over that album. So really love his work and the way it's put together on multiple projects. I know that electronic music doesn't always go down that well on this podcast, so I'm kind of intrigued to see what you all think. But yeah, Nicholas Jaar.
Who do you want to go to?
That's it.
Pick someone. Pick your favourite of us.
I'll go to Matt.
Oh, what? Fuck that
Matt's
shit.
everyone's favourite.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I've actually wanted to after we listened to one of his albums, an Against All Logic album, a couple years ago, and I enjoyed it quite a lot, but I wasn't blown away by it. But it made me want to try and listen to him, and so I remember trying to put together something to just taking some of the top songs of Spotify and listening to those. And I was like, oh, this is cool. But the playlist you put together, I really, really engaged with. So I kudos to you.
You're
It's
better than Spotify.
Really, better than just whatever like the top 5 songs are. Yeah. It's curated, and I think I really. But to get to what you were talking about, the thing that I really appreciate about this is his songcraft. He, throughout the songs that you put, they're all quite diverse, but there is this continued presence of like, he knows what he's doing, he's going to gradually build, he's going to give you a payoff after having this really kind of moment of euphoria or a moment of release of some kind. And despite the fact that there's no lyrics, which we all know mean nothing to me, there's so much emotion contained within it, and it really just takes you somewhere. It has so much feeling within it. And so I just, I thought it was really, really enjoyable, way to finish. And even like these songs that are 11 minutes or 8 minutes long, like there's payoff the entire way through, because it's always building, it's always adding something, it's always doing something and morphing before you. I think Dark Side was my favorite of this selection, but like everything had something for me, so I enjoyed it a lot.
Okay, maybe I'll jump in.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was wondering whether we should finish with you, Nick. Seems
go for it, Fran.
Should we finish with you?
Yeah.
The final word.
How
Fantastic.
before he takes his break.
Get in.
Okay, Tom. So when you were picking Nicholas Jaar, when I knew that was what we were going to be listening to, I was definitely the opposite of excited, whatever you would call that. And the reason for that, Matt just touched on this, is we covered the Against All Logic album a while back on the podcast, and I really didn't like that. It's not my thing, and that checks out here. Like, I could very much live without the Against All Logic track that you chose. And I also, Swim was more interesting, but I struggled with Swim. The 30-minute song at the end. And I think those two songs have something in common. I think they're both a little bit too housey, a bit too techno-y for me. And I actually didn't think they were that as inventive as maybe some of the other stuff. All of that said, I was totally blown away by the rest of the list. I love the creepy, almost menacing Etra, the opening song that you talked about. It's interesting to hear that it's meant to like represent his childhood, because he must have had a creepy fucking childhood. That song reminded me quite a lot, and this is the obligatory Fran bringing up something to do with Radiohead, but it reminded me of some of Tom York's solo output, particularly the stuff he did for Suspiria, which obviously came after this, so he's probably influenced by Nicholas Jaar there. I've got a feeling that he is into Nicholas Jaar from some of his Radio 1 mixes where he's included Nicholas Jaar stuff. I'm obviously there for that. And then I really enjoyed both the Dark Side tracks. I think they're really involving, really hypnotic. I think of the two, Golden Arrow is my favourite. I think it just builds so effectively, and every new layer gives it something new, takes it up a notch. And you've both mentioned song construction. That song is amazingly constructed. Avalanche, though, the Just Friends one, saying I'm a Nick Cave and a Leonard Cohen fan, I did not pick up that this was a cover, but it's undoubtedly the best song on the whole of this month's playlist. Gorgeous vocals by fucking Steven Spielberg's daughter. Bizarre. I think it's a sort of great mix of trip-hop and ambient music. I think it's just fantastic. So in the end, this was a really successful playlist for me, and you've changed my mind about Nicholas Jaar, now that I know there's so much more to him than Against All Logic. Separately, I'm going to pick your brains about what albums I should spend some time with, because it seems like there's a lot of stuff out there by him. But really impressed, and really, really glad I got to spend some time with it and not just Against All Logic, which I hated. So thank you.
Nice.
Okay.
Excellent.
Drum roll, please. This is my final comment on the final podcast. Yeah, that wasn't a drum roll. That was just you whining.
Yeah, no, I can't do a drum roll. I don't have any drums.
So it was great. It was great, first of all, because I did notice that there was an FK Twigs connection, and it's nice to sort of join up the dots about the latest production sort of pairing that she has with him, and that kind of intrigued me immediately. A couple of things that you said kind of rung, Tom, that is, rung true to my thoughts about it, which was it was an incredibly spacious playlist, and I think that was really, really impressive. It really blew me away how big a canvas, I think that's a word used as well, he was able to generate. Because a lot of the bands that I love most, say take Portishead, managed to do a very small amount of sound on a very big space, and it's actually, I can attest, extremely hard to generate that idea of the space without filling the space. So I think he does a fantastic job of that. Particularly Golden Arrow was my favourite one, I think, in that regard.
Yeah.
You also said that it was meditative. I think that seems very, very appropriate. But I think, when you mentioned this, that used the word canvas, it was definitely reference to something to do with, I can't remember the exact phrase used about silence being something that he was working with silence. And that's exactly what I mean about the spaciousness. This was a playlist of songs with somebody who has incredible amount of confidence in their ability to hold our attention, and boldness, and also technical acumen to be able to make something sound enormous when the actual sound that's coming out of it is sometimes, at least, tiny. So I thought that was really, I was wowed by that, frankly. And it doesn't surprise me. It feels like an FK Twigs was a good match. You know, like, it seems logical that they would work together in various parts of the stuff she's done. So, I absolutely loved it. Wasn't familiar with this playlist stuff at all, really. And really pleased you introduced it to me. So thank you very much.
Wow. Got across the board success there, by the sounds of it.
Well, almost. I gave you a 50-50, I think. So, yeah.
It was more like a 75-25 from me.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
That's all I had to say on that one. I think it was great. Thanks very much.
Cool.
Excellent.
Well, as we've mentioned a couple of times, Nick is obviously he's taking a step back. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Nick, about that.
I was sort of not really, not particularly. I'll see. I'm excited to see where you take stuff, and on the site and on the podcast, and I'm sure it'll go strength to strength. And it's been 5-6 years, so when Fran and my friend Nermal and I started it, so it's exciting to see how much it's grown. It's great. I think everyone's done. All of the 6 of us have done a lot of work to make it what it is, and I'm pleased about it. Yeah. So, I was considering rating everyone of the editors in terms of your ability to judge good music, but I'll just go with Fran as he was the original one, and say that I would guess he's right 20% of the time in his taste in music. So the rest of you can just speculate amongst yourselves what I think of your own ratings. But yeah, nobody breaks 50-50 though. I'll say that much. So
I'd say 20%.
Okay,
I mean, from
enough.
Somebody who likes some of the stuff you like, I'm pretty happy that you're only like 20% of what I like.
Okay,
Otherwise, I would have terrible taste in music. So
nice comeback, I love it. So,
It's a nice reciprocal number for that.
Absolutely. So
and it wouldn't make sense if we didn't end this episode without us having a bit of abuse towards each other, Nick, because that would.
I know. I
be
feel like
a sad
that's been
way to
our.
end if we were just nice at the end. So I'm not going to say anything lovely about you. I'm just going to say,
Go on.
you like some shit music, but
Okay.
you're a good lad.
Thank you. Wow, that's
You're a good lad.
I've known you since 2015. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Well, I wanted to add that I've enjoyed talking about music with you.
Yeah,
And I've
it's been
actually
great.
learned a lot because you are definitely more knowledgeable about stuff. I'm more like, this made me feel cool. And you're like, there's some really interesting parts at the underneath.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I could.
But
glad I
that's
could
if we
contribute.
believe that he's right when he talks about these
Yeah.
things,
Yeah,
That's just
anyone
'cause we
knows-
don't know anything about music. He could be
Exactly.
talking total
Yeah.
bullshit.
Anyone knows anything about studio production will know that I'm talking absolute shit. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
He just says in the box all lo-fi. That's all he says.
Yeah.
And studio's instrument. That's the other one I love.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But it's all in the shadow of Little Simz. Isn't
Exactly,
it,
exactly.
really?
Had to get to that. All right, so yeah, that's that, I think. And I just want to say thanks to Sam and James as well, who've been on this podcast many times, and other guests we've had in the past. So yeah, good luck with it all.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Cool.
Well, on that, I suppose we'll have a little mention of next time. But first of all,
Yeah.
thank you, Tom. It feels like Tom's
Yes, thank you,
appearing
Tom.
is getting drowned out a bit by
Yeah.
saying bye to
Thanks for
Nick,
your
but
picks
thanks
as
for
well.
coming
Then.
on, Tom.
Thanks for your picks, Tom. That was really good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for picking Lorde.
Yeah,
mate.
no, thanks. Thanks for having me, and hope you revisit that Lorde album and enjoy it.
Yeah, all the
And
time.
thanks for confirming
All
that
the
it was a
time.
bubbling synth at the start of the
It was,
Turnstile album.
yeah.
It was bubbling, but it was very good. It was a good bubble.
Good bubbles.
Absolutely.
All right, should we talk
Good
next time,
bubbles.
Matt? I suppose it's over
Yeah.
to me and you to. So next time, what are you going with?
I have the 4 picks written down.
Okay.
If you want me to go through those, which just as an FYI for people listening, next time Sam will be joining us, and we'll obviously figuring out things beyond that. So stay tuned. But
Yeah.
for next month, we have Amil and the Sniffers with Comfort to Me. Injury Reserve with By the Time I Get to Phoenix, Lil Nas X with Montero, and Cold War Kids with New Age Norms 3. And so there will be new albums. And then Fran will be hosting. So
Yes, I will be hosting, and I've chosen a classic by Karen Dalton, and I can't remember the name of the album. So it's one of Karen Dalton's albums. She's got 2, and it's the second one. Look it up. And I will be
In my
telling
own
you
time.
in my own time. Thank you. Look it up in your own time. Sorry, that's a terrible joke.
Oh, wow.
And I'll be telling you all why I love UK hip hop pioneer Roots Maneuver. So look
Nice.
forward to that.
Nice. Cool.
Cool.
All right.
Go to the
See you all next
website,
time.
do all the social media
Yeah,
stuff that
yeah.
happens, and do those things.
Pickybees.com, at pickybastards, and yeah, all that stuff.
Thanks a lot, then. See you later.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.